Chapter 5, Outro. We have now arrived at the conclusion of this book. Whether you would like to call it an afterword, an epilogue, closing remarks, in summary, or anything of that nature, these are this author's parting words to you, the reader. While fictional literature has its place, anybody can write a book that tells a story or communicates a message which is meant to distract, occupy, or entertain the reader's mind for a little bit. It's a total other undertaking, however, to throw down a piece of literary art that will give the reader something deeper and spiritual that they can keep forever. From the beginning of this project, I had set out to create something that not only stimulates the mind and moves the soul, but also fundamentally alters the entire way in which you see the world and all of reality. This book was meant to touch and change people. I hope you will always look back upon this book as something that, in a figurative sense, fell out of the sky, interrupted your life, and caused a paradigm mega shift of cosmic proportions. I hope that one day you look back upon your experience of reading this book in such a way that you remember it having had a positive impact on the course of your entire life. I hope that it produces traits of loving the truth and fearlessness in you. If an author is not writing something that somebody can keep inside of them forever, then they're doing little more than wasting the reader's time. I have 7 things that I would like you to take away from your experience of having read this book. 7 items that I want you to remember forever from this book. Number 1, I want to say thank you to you, the reader, for both purchasing and reading this book. Number 2, I want to be clearly understood that this book's authorship was not intended to insult or hurt the feelings of any particular person or people. Much the opposite. It is meant to be a constructive criticism of a religious worldview, of a theological system. Number 3, I want you to remember that this is but one chapter out of an entire forthcoming larger book called The Church Militant that, when it comes out, will have many other chapters of religious and philosophical content of this high of quality and this high of magnitude. Please prepare your mind and heart to receive the full-length book with favor when it arrives on the scene. 4, I want you to think for a moment about how severely the Nation of Islam has been beaten up and destroyed by the main point of this book. An Islamic fatwa has been issued which demonstrates that the Black Muslim movement in America does not have the respect or the acknowledgement of the international Muslim world across the planet, and this needs to be a red flag to you. You'd be foolish to ignore it. Number 5, the fatwa, though it is extremely damning to Farrakhanism, is simply one weapon that exists in an entire arsenal, one tool that exists in an entire toolbox of a huge case that exists against the reliability of the spiritual message of the Nation of Islam. And it's not even the most explosive one that exists. Number 6, while you were reading this book, somebody in your life flashed to your mind. My cousin needs to know this information, or my uncle needs to see this, or Jimmy from 3 blocks down ought to check this out, or I wonder how Brother Muhammad or Brother Shabazz at my job would react to this book, or whatever, especially your sons, especially your loved ones. With these folks in mind, please buy more copies of this book for people that you know who need to read it. And please get this information into other people's hands that you know it will help. Number 7, I want you to think for a second about your eternal destiny. You will breathe your last one day, and you know that you're a sinner in need of a Savior. And this book has shown you the religion of the Black Muslim movement will not help you in the sight of a holy and just God. You must leave Islam and you must come to Christianity, and you must do it today, right now. Takeaway number 1 of 7. I want to say thank you to everyone who not only spent their hard-earned money on acquiring a copy of this volume, but who also dedicated their valuable time to reading, trying to understand, and carefully considering the facts behind the arguments that support its message. We live in economically uncertain times, so this author knows very well that the money you spent on this book could have went towards other things in your family's house. The fact that you chose to make the financial sacrifice and buy this book is something for which I'm extremely grateful. We also have many things in our culture, society, and families that compete for our time and our attention. That you spent time and attention on working your way through this entire book, which could have been spent on other things, is something for which I'm extremely grateful. And I have done my best with the help of God to jam-pack this book full of content that made it worth it for you. And it is my prayer that you got something positive out of it. In exchange for both the time and the money that you poured into your Exodus from Chicago experience, I am overjoyed at the fact that you and I have been able to connect through the medium of literature. Takeaway number 2 of 7. It's very important to make a necessary distinction between people and a religion, to make a dichotomy between persons and theological systems. If you can separate these two concepts in your mind, then I would like you to remember that the motive of writing this book has not been to attack any particular people or persons. It is simply to exercise the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion that exist in this author's home country, the United States of America, at least as of now in 2025, by way of offering a constructive criticism of a religious worldview that has come across my radar many times, providing a Christian answer regarding a belief system that I've been asked my opinion about as a clergyman and as a religious leader for 3 decades of my life, is literally something that I took vows before God to do. So I'm just fulfilling my calling and keeping my promises to God and to God's people. Minister Louis Farrakhan is somebody of which I am a fan in multiple ways. There are many things he says which I feel are excellent. There are many things he says which I feel are true. When he discusses some of the things that have taken place in the history of the United States of America, when he discusses some of the residual race-based problems that continue to afflict this country, having trickled down through the generations even until today, stemming from the time of the slave trade, Jim Crow, segregation, etc. When he discusses the cultural, societal, political, and family crises of our day, when he goes down conspiracy theory rabbit holes and boldly connects the dots. I am a huge fan of a large percentage of his views on many areas of life. And I admire his dynamic delivery technique, that is, his unique oratorical style. I honestly feel that if he and I met, I would enjoy his company. This is not an attack on a human being. As a Christian, I believe that all human beings share a common ancestor and that we all descend from Adam. I also believe that Adam and Eve were probably black. Every human being descended from one of the 3 sons of Noah that got off of the ark. This is without regard to external appearance, skin color, culture, economic status, or geographical location. I love every human being as having been made in the image and likeness of God, and view all as my brothers and sisters in Adam. Writing this book is literally attempting to serve my Messiah and my fellow created human beings by obeying the commands of God to provide a response to non-Christian and anti-Christian systems of belief and thought, particularly hostile anti-Christian ideologies that speak out and teach against Christianity. Anybody who thinks that they can slander Christianity and Christians without so much as a whimper of a response from the preachers has not read their Bible. We are commanded to respond. I have every right to react to the anti-Christian lies spoken and taught by the leaders of the Nation of Islam with the actual truth. I want to make it clear that the motive of this book was an attempt to do a good deed specifically for the exaltation of the name and honor of Jesus Christ. I don't confront the black Muslim movement in my own name because I'm nothing. I confront the Nation of Islam in the name of Jesus Christ because he deserves the praise, honor, and glory, both now and forever. Amen. Takeaway number 3 of 7. I would like the reader to be reminded of the fact that this publication is simply one chapter that will be included with many other similar chapters composing a larger and broader book called The Church Militant one day soon. Do you remember the analogy that I used in the introduction? When your favorite musical artist has a new album, oftentimes the record company releases several singles from that album to be sold alone for play on the radio. The single is meant to point the listening audience towards the larger and more complete project, the full-length album, of which that single is simply one part. I would like you to view this work as but one single from a figurative album called The Church Militant, which is currently in production. And ask yourself the question, what if I had a thicker book containing 10 more chapters of information like this, or 20 chapters, or 30 chapters? Would that book not be a blockbuster, a showstopper, a game changer, a world rocker? What impact would a book of that size and magnitude have on my spiritual life, on my spiritual education? Please do not forget the joy and the knowledge that you received while you were reading this volume. And please look forward to the release of the future book that it has been extracted out of. In this larger book, there will be a couple of chapters that deal with the Nation of Islam, but there are so many more topics covered that relate to the Christian faith, life, and practice. To me, as its author, it's a very important book. If that book is my baby, I hope to give birth to it at some point soon. And if this smaller sneak preview single chapter book has made a footprint on your life, then it's reasonable to believe that the other book, larger and with even more information, should really take you to new places in your spiritual growth and your spiritual development. Please be on the lookout for The Church Militant when it comes out down the road. I believe it will be an important and life-changing book for you and everyone that you love. Takeaway number 4 of 7. I want you to remember and give serious thought to the size and the scope of this damning fatwa that has been issued against the Nation of Islam. On a global big picture scale, the black Muslim movement in America has been thoroughly discredited, as it is rejected as an authentic expression of the religion of Islam by the rest of the Muslim world. The Nation of Islam's leaders and followers do not have the respect or the acknowledgement of the Muslims on a global scale. The closest illustration that I can give you is from the perspective of Christian, that we have certain false spin-offs that claim the name Christian for themselves. The Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, who have the nerve to call themselves Jehovah's Witnesses, they claim our name. They borrow our terminology. To the untrained, they could be viewed as one of us. But we have went to great lengths for nearly 200 years to scholastically define, document, demonstrate, and defend the fact that the things they believe and spread are so disconnected from us that they are not of us. We test their teachings versus the Bible and versus 2,000 years of Christian theological and philosophical thought. And we are able to establish beyond a reasonable doubt, to a moral certainty, that the so-called Jehovah's Witnesses are a cheap counterfeit. When someone is considering joining the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, one of the damning things that must be taken into consideration by anybody with an IQ is that it is condemned by the rest of the Christian world. We are on record globally with a unified voice saying that is a poor man's amateur hour attempt at a spin-off which fails miserably. We also have the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS, oftentimes known as the Mormons. They borrow our terminology. They borrow our Bible. They even borrow some of our music. In their public presentations before the world, they identify themselves as quote-unquote Christians. Yet they do not have our respect, admiration, or recognition. We do not view them as fellow Christians. When we meet them, we view them as lost. We view them as being in need of evangelism, trusting their eternal destiny to damning theological heresy, and standing positionally as a citizen of hell, even while they're alive, because they lack belief in the truth, and they do so extremely flagrantly and openly. These are two pseudo-Christian cultic illustrations that you need to see as examples. Allow our view of them to inform you as to how the rest of the Muslim world looks at and sees the Nation of Islam. Muslims across the globe look at America's local mosque number 7 or local mosque number 5 or the Boston Mosque or the Detroit Mosque or whatever mosque as simply the Kingdom Hall of Islam. They see it as the Mormon Temple of Islam. If you will allow that analogy, I feel that it works. A failed pseudo-Islamic attempt at a spin-off. They see the Nation of Islam as something that borrows their terminology, their catchphrases, and even their Quran itself. Yet the Nation of Islam doesn't teach what all of Islam across the planet teaches. Muslims do not look at members of the Nation of Islam as fellow Muslims. They do not see them as their brothers or their sisters. As Kendrick Lamar says, they're not like us. If you are a rational and a thinking person, this devastating information must sink into your thought process. It has to carry some kind of weight in the working out of the mathematics in your mind as to whether or not you belong in the nation. If I began a church tomorrow and the entire Christian world outside of my congregation resoundingly rejected my teachings as anti-Christian, as unbiblical, this would be, as the kids call it, a red flag. If the top Christian scholars and thinkers did a detailed group examination of my theology and determined that my teachings were kooky, they were weird, and flew directly in the face of the Christian faith and of the Bible, this would have to mean something. Not only to already existing members who were currently in my congregation, but also to prospective members who were considering joining it. People who would ignore this would have to be viewed as extremely dishonest or extremely stupid. The fact that the Muslim world has renounced Farrakhanism at the highest level and in the most scathing manner has to be taken into consideration by you if you care about believing and walking in the truth at all. The fatwa covered in this book took place in 1998. After it was issued, it caused a chain reaction. In the 21st century, other similar and equally devastating fatwas were issued out of other countries in the Islamic world. It seems like I learn a new one all the time. Whether we are talking about Mecca, Medina, Cairo, or wherever on the planet, the verdict is always the same. When Elijah Muhammad died in 1975, Farrakhan was not chosen as his successor. It was actually Elijah Muhammad's son, Warith Deen Muhammad, who took the reins. But while Warith Deen Muhammad loved his dad Elijah, he also knew that what Elijah taught the black community in America was un-Islamic, un-Quranic, and un-Hadithic. If anybody in their entire life ever had an emotional reason to fight against logic and to try to see the Nation of Islam as legit, it would be him. His dad was the legend. Yet when looking at it objectively and versus the primary source documentary evidence of the religion of Islam, even he knew that the game had to be over. Between 1929 and 1975, the charade had gone on for 46 years and had done untold damage. It was time for this dog to be put down. Elijah Muhammad's son, Elijah Muhammad's successor, Warith Deen Muhammad, disbanded the Nation of Islam in 1976. He renounced the deviant teachings of his dad, Elijah Muhammad, as well as those of Wallace Farad Muhammad, who had come before him. He encouraged the Nation of Islam followers of 1975 and following to also renounce those anti-Islamic Nation of Islam teachings and join the international Islamic community and embrace the purest form of the religion of Islam. Farrakhan was so upset that Warith Deen Muhammad was named the successor of Elijah Muhammad instead of himself that, in a temper tantrum, he created his own splinter religion, originally called the Final Call. Later on, he literally changed the Final Call organization's name to the Nation of Islam. But the real Nation of Islam's actual successor had disbanded it years beforehand. And nobody chose Farrakhan to do this reboot. He was self-appointed. He forced his way to the front. Elijah Muhammad's Nation of Islam had been absorbed into a global Islamic community by his son, and it did not exist anymore. Farrakhan's Nation of Islam, though he claims to have resurrected the original teachings of Wallace Farad Muhammad and Elijah Muhammad, does not have a proper lineage, does not have a proper line of succession. Warith Deen Muhammad dissolved the Nation of Islam, and it disappeared from the earth. In 1975, Farrakhan's revival of it is an unauthorized fake imitation Nation of Islam. It fails on more levels than can possibly be covered here. As a matter of fact, I will probably be adding a couple of more appendices to this book following this chapter, some bonus material for you. There will be an appendix in which I will give you yet another example of another fatwa that exists against the Nation of Islam coming out of the broader and global Muslim world. You have to see this as Farrakhan is trying to tell me that I became a Muslim when I started following him, but his teachings so violently contradict the Quran and the Hadith that the rest of the Muslim world outside of the nation became so concerned about it that they felt the need to step in and officially say something. That's a very big deal. Do not minimize, do not underestimate its significance. Takeaway number 5 of 7. I want to remind you that the Nation of Islam, or the Black Muslim movement in America, is what we call a multi-headed devil. That means that there are many angles from which you can hit it. It has a lot of mortal weaknesses. It has many points of catastrophic vulnerability from which an attack against or refutation of it can be launched successfully. If time permitted, I could have authored a catastrophic full-length book containing dozens upon dozens of different atomic bomb caliber facts that destroy the Nation of Islam with the same level of devastation that you've read here in this book. This is not the only argument that exists, and it's not even the most damning. If you are a member of the Nation of Islam, I want you to understand that your entire spiritual world is resting upon the shakiest of possible pillars. There are 3 and counting different ministers in the Nation of Islam against whom I had scheduled debates, but Louis Farrakhan himself at the last minute intervened and prevented these debates from happening. There's always a reason that is cited as to why it could not or should not happen. And I cannot blame him, because if I was in his position, I would not want of my ministers to debate Brian James Shanley on television either. But the point I'm seeking to make is that there's an entire rabbit hole of information that hits the Black Muslim movement with lethal impact in its most vital organs. Like I said, this fatwa issue is but one piece of a much larger puzzle. I believe that it has been done here in a convincing manner. Your heart and imagination is likely running wild, speculating about what other and more potent things I could have written if I had made an entire volume dedicated to machine gun style automatic fire, surgically targeting the Nation of Islam with every single weapon available. This is just one bullet in an overall arsenal, which itself is composed of many guns. Metaphorically speaking, of course. It's just one tool in a broader toolbox that exists in a large garage full of toolboxes. Even though the Nation of Islam has been utterly destroyed in this small and humble book, I did hold back many things. But you have to ask yourself, if this isn't the only or even the most devastating piece of evidence that exists, which dismantles the Black Muslim movement, which destroys the Nation of Islam, then perhaps I should reconsider my fascination with or involvement in it. Takeaway number 6 of 7. Takeaway number 6 of 7. Some professions that people work are regulated by laws which make them a mandated reporter. In the course of performing their job duties, if they learn of a crime that's been committed, they are bound to share that information with the proper authorities. This includes teachers, some counselors, etc. I feel that when it comes to matters of truth and eternal destiny, we must all view ourselves as mandated reporters. You cannot read the blockbusting information that has been revealed in this work and pretend to not have seen it. It demands sharing. All of us know a person who is considering the claims of Farrakhanism, or somebody who believes in and practices it. I'm asking you to call the publishing house that has printed this book and order more copies. Give them to the people you love. There is no more valuable gift that you can give somebody than the gift of truth. And this book is a nuclear truth bomb that the recipient will be grateful to you for loving them enough to share with them. And finally, takeaway number 7 of 7. I would be doing less than my duty as a proclaimer of the Christian gospel message if I did not throw out to you with all love and sincerity the invitation to come to Jesus. You are lucky to live in a time in which you have the entire encyclopedia of 66 scrolls bound into one volume, telling you with a unified voice that you are a sinner, that you stand guilty in the sight of a holy and just God. Your Maker has been keeping a record of every second of your life, every word that's ever left your mouth, every thought that's ever run through your mind, every motive that's ever energized your heart and soul, every act that you've ever performed in your body. You will stand before your Maker. You will stand trial. You will be made to explain yourself. But you will have no defense. You will have no excuse. You are guilty beyond a reasonable doubt to a moral certainty. You will be convicted. You will be sentenced. What awaits you on the other side of your last breath will make the worst pain that you've ever suffered in this life look like Disneyland by comparison. You will be in excruciating physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional pain. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. It'll be constant. You will be fully awake, fully aware, and fully conscious of every second of that experience. And it will go on for trillions and trillions of millennia, for eternity. And judicially speaking, you deserve all of that and more. Everything you've ever said, everything you've ever thought, everything you've ever felt, everything you've ever done, every second of every day over the many decades that you've lived. It will all be put under the microscope. It will all be thoroughly examined. Anything that's not like his perfect, sinless character and nature is going to be viewed as a capital death penalty caliber crime against him. Anything that's in conflict with what he has declared to be right, just, and moral will be viewed as an offense against the very throne of heaven itself. You've lived a long life. How many death sentences do you think you have coming to you? Possibly tens upon tens of thousands. That's a frightening thing. But the good news is that God the Son, in the historical figure of Jesus of Nazareth, lived a sinless life on behalf of God's elect. He perfectly obeyed the law down to letter on behalf of God's elect. He was nailed to a Roman cross on behalf of God's elect. He stayed in the grave for 3 days. Then early on Sunday morning, he got up out of the grave, all power in his hands. Death was powerless to hold him. The grave was powerless to hold him. One day when you stand in judgment, this resurrected and glorified Messiah can intervene on your behalf. He can be that defense attorney in the heavenly courtroom that gets your charges dropped, not based on your work, not based on anything having to do with you, but 100% fully based upon his life, his death, his burial, and his resurrection. The horrible debt that you owe to heaven for your capital death penalty caliber crimes against God was paid in full on the cross by Jesus Christ. Won't you receive him today? Then on the other side of your last breath, you can cross the river. You can study war no more in the celestial city. You can reunite with your great-great-grandparents and ancestors who died as Christians. And you can be together at the feet of the Messiah, worshiping and praising him for all eternity. It has been this author's goal throughout this entire book to urge you to renounce Islam in any and all of its forms and accept the life-saving, soul-saving truth of God the Son, Jesus Christ, right now while the opportunity still exists. Brian James Shanley, Doctor of Divinity, son of Susan Shanley, 1956 to 2020, legendary warrior and lioness of the Christian faith.